Mixed martial arts isn't like any other sport. You can play basketball, football, or baseball, but you can't play MMA. It is real. In fact, it is as real as you can get. In any other sport, if a referee makes a mistake, you could lose a few points, or at most, lose a game. But in MMA, a mistake from a referee could very well lead to ruined lives, or in the worst case scenario, even death. Fortunately, MMA promotions take the appointment of referees very seriously, especially in major promotions like the UFC. Still, sometimes some bad apples get through. No one is saying that refereeing is an easy job, and sometimes even the best of the best make mistakes and misjudgments. However, some referees just suck at their job to the point that they have to be fired. So let's take a look at what happens when MMA referees suck at their job. When it comes to MMA officials, few have stood in the spotlight, for better or for worse, quite like Mario Yamasaki. With a career spanning decades, Yamasaki has been a central figure in some of the most high-profile fights in MMA history, and unfortunately, some of its biggest blunders as well. To be fair to Yamasaki, he is a veteran of the sport. He has officiated over 450 fights, and for the most part, they have been solid. However, the few mistakes he has made has been quite controversial as well. Looking at his most controversial decisions in the octagon, when it comes to stopping fights at the right time, Mario Yamasaki has had moments that were more missed than hit. Either he stops them too early or too late, both of which can be devastating for the fighters, their teams, and the fans. Mario became the second referee to work for the UFC following John McCarthy and made his officiating debut at UFC 20 in 1999. In his early career, his mistakes were few and far between. The majority of his decisions as a referee were solid. However, when he did make mistakes, they were usually in high-profile fights, where his decisions could have altered the careers of UFC legends and put other fighters' health at risk. It wasn't until UFC 52, a full 6 years after his debut in the UFC, and with 44 fights under his belt, when he made his first blunder. In a highly anticipated UFC welterweight championship rematch, Matt Hughes was defending his title against Frank Trigg. Early in the first round, Frank delivered an illegal groin strike. Hughes looked to referee Mario Yamasaki, expecting a pause in the action. Yamasaki initially moved to intervene, but then hesitated, causing a moment of confusion for Matt. This hesitation allowed Frank to capitalize, knocking Matt down and unleashing a fierce ground and pound assault, nearly securing a submission victory. Despite the adversity, Matt mounted a remarkable comeback, ultimately winning the fight with a submission in the same round. This fight was later inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, with Dana White once calling it his favorite as well, likely due to Matt Hughes' remarkable comeback rather than Yamasaki's officiating. We can't deny that Mario Yamasaki nearly cost a UFC legend his title and ruined his legacy because of his indecisiveness. In this fight, Yamasaki didn't step in when he should have, so as if trying to balance the scales in his next blunder in the cage, he stepped in when he shouldn't have. At UFC 70, during a prelim bout between Alessio Sakara and Victor Valimaki, Yamasaki made a controversial call. Less than 2 minutes into the fight, Sakara landed a powerful right hand that stunned Victor. Yamasaki intervened, leading the commentators, spectators, and even Alessio Sakara, who was already on top of the cage celebrating, to believe that the fight was over. Instead, he called a timeout in the middle of a potentially fight-ending sequence because Victor Valimaki's mouthguard had fallen out. Now, it is understandable that Yamasaki wanted to protect the fighter, but typically referees look for a brief stop in the action to give the fighter their mouthguard back. instead of pausing the action and giving a stunned fighter time to recover. Fortunately, Sakara stepped back on the gas as soon as Yamasaki resumed the action and got a quick TKO win, having to knock his opponent out twice in the same fight. While the right fighter ended up winning his last two mistakes, the same cannot be said for his next fumble when he stole a win from a fighter who had literally already knocked his opponent out. At UFC 142, Yamasaki was the third man in the cage with Eric Silva and Carlo Prater. In a welterweight showdown, just seconds into the first round, Silva landed a hard knee which rocked Prater and followed up with a few quick shots, prompting Yamasaki to step in and end the fight. Now that is where the story should have ended, but to everyone's surprise, Mario Yamasaki disqualified Silva, saying that he landed illegal shots to the back of his opponent's head.
Mario Yamasaki has said that it is going to be ruled a no contest, or he's going to be disqualified because of illegal blows to the back of the head.
Unfortunately for Yamasaki, the action replay showed that all of his shots landed in the closing sequence were legal and more to the side of the head. Joe Rogan even started interrogating Yamasaki in the middle of the cage during the post-fight interview, which resulted in one of the most embarrassing moments of Yamasaki's career.
Okay, Eric, please come here again. Look, Mario Yamasaki is a great referee, but I think he made a mistake here. How do you feel about this?
Moving on, as if risking a fighter's career wasn't enough, in the same year at UFC 153, his poor decision-making put a fighter's health at risk. Glover Teixeira was fighting Fabio Maldonado, and from beginning of the fight, the mismatch was quite obvious. Glover took Fabio down in the first round and landed devastating punches and elbows from mount, which would have been enough to end the fight. But Mario Yamasaki was content with watching Maldonado get battered up. Fabio was too tough for his own good, and after another round of taking excessive damage, it was obvious that Mario Yamasaki wasn't going to do anything about it.
Oh my goodness!
Losing his mind.
So the ringside doctor had to step in and stop the fight. Yamasaki didn't make any major controversial decisions in the coming years. However, he made up for that with two late stoppages on the same card at UFC Fight Night 83. This was followed by another late stoppage in the fight between Derek Lewis and Travis Brown, where Yamasaki allowed Brown to take multiple unnecessary punches from Derek Lewis, the guy that hits like a train, even when he wasn't able to defend himself. In classic Yamasaki fashion, he then tried to balance his late stoppages with an early one when he prematurely stopped the fight between Michael Chiesa and Kevin Lee. In the first round, with less than 30 seconds left on the clock, Kevin Lee caught Chiesa in a choke and Yamasaki stopped the fight, even though Chiesa didn't tap. With a few seconds left in the round, it was entirely possible for Chiesa to defend and escape, or at least survive, to the end of the round. But Yamasaki made a bad call, putting an end to Michael Chiesa's 3-fight winning streak, which could have led him to a title shot. A few months later, Yamasaki made the decision that would finally get him banned from officiating fights in the UFC. And surprise, surprise, it was another late stoppage. In 2018, Valentina Shevchenko made her UFC flyweight debut against UFC newcomer Priscilla Cachoeira. In a brutal one-sided onslaught, Valentina battered Priscilla on the ground, landing 203 strikes to Priscilla's 3, before taking mercy and choking Priscilla out while Yamasaki stood there doing nothing. This fight was the final straw, and since then, he has been banned from officiating fights in the UFC.
I think he's disgusting, and I never want to see him reffing ever again.
Though Yamasaki gets a lot of hate, the title for the worst MMA referee definitely goes to Steve Mazzagatti. Though he has officiated hundreds of fights, his mistakes were so awful that he put fighters' lives at risk multiple times because of his utter incompetence as an MMA official. Though he has had a lot of blunders throughout his career, the most high profile was probably the awful Jon Jones disqualification, which still stands as his only loss in his otherwise undefeated career. In 2009, Jon Jones faced Matt Hamill in a highly anticipated matchup which many believed would be the toughest challenge of his career. However, Jon Jones showed that he was levels above Hamill. He out-wrestled him and landed devastating ground and pound with multiple elbows, which should have been enough for Mazzagatti to end the fight. However, he let the fight go and let Matt Hamill take shot after shot until Jones landed one illegal elbow. This is when Mazzagatti stepped in, and initially he took a point from Jones, but then immediately stopped the fight. Jones thought that he had won. However, he was shocked when Bruce Buffer announced the fight as a DQ loss for him.
Due to intentional elbows, there's been a disqualification of Johnny Bones Jones. Therefore, the winner is Matt Hamill.
Steve Mazzagatti said that he stopped the fight because Hamill could not continue to fight, which would make sense if he couldn't continue because of the elbow. But he actually couldn't continue because of a damaged shoulder, which was injured during a legal throw. However, overall, the decision did not make sense. Mazzagatti forced Hamill to take a lot of unnecessary damage, even after Jon Jones complained to him to stop the fight multiple times, and he ruined Jon Jones' undefeated career. Next up, we have one of the worst stoppages in MMA history. In fact, it was like there wasn't even a referee in the octagon, as the fighter stopped the fight himself and walked away from an unconscious opponent before Steve Mazzagatti realized that he should stop the fight. In 2012, Josh Berkman fought John Fitch in the World Series of Fighting, and Steve Mazzagatti was the third man in the cage.
Yeah, boy.
The fight lasted less than a minute, and as Berkman rocked John Fitch and put him in a deep guillotine choke, Fitch went unconscious, and when Berkman realized that Mazzagatti wouldn't stop the fight, he turned Fitch's unconscious body over and stood up. This is when Steve finally stepped in and stopped the fight. In a 2008 welterweight bout, Anthony Johnson faced Kevin Burns in what started as a closely contested match. However, the fight took a controversial turn due to Burns' repeated eye pokes. Despite Anthony Johnson being poked in the eye 3 times and voicing his protest, referee Steve Mazzagatti did not intervene. The situation escalated when Johnson was poked in the eye once more, causing him to fall to the ground in distress. At this point, Mazzagatti stopped the fight, controversially awarding Burns a TKO victory. Johnson protested, but neither Mazzagatti nor the commission cared to listen, even though the eye pokes were so bad that Johnson suffered from a torn retina. Unlike the Jon Jones fight, this eye poke was enough for a disqualification. However, as if he was allergic to making the right call, Mazzagatti gave the win to Burns, the fighter who got the TKO with an illegal shot. Overall, Steve Mazzagatti was a very dangerous referee. He made a lot of really bad decisions, putting fighters' health at risk and adversely affecting their careers as well. The UFC complained about him to the Athletic Commission multiple times, but the commission kept appointing him until 2013. Lastly, we can't finish a discussion about bad referees without mentioning Vyacheslav Kiselev. He only officiated about 10 fights in the UFC and ended up getting fired in the middle of an event because of his awful referee work in the 2021 fight between Dos Santos and Benoit Saint-Denis. Benoit Saint-Denis' UFC debut turned into a nightmare when Kiselev let him absorb some of the worst punishment ever endured by a fighter. For 3 rounds, he got battered by Dos Santos, to the point that the fight could have been stopped multiple times. Kiselev just stood there while Benoit took bomb after bomb to the face. The commentators and even experienced referees were screaming from ringside to stop the fight, but the ref just kept it going.
Oh! Man, he's leaking bad now too. Saint-Denis, yeah. Dos Santos is like, what do you want me to do?
Right.
He
Stop the fight.
Stop the fight. Oh, stop the fight.
Come on, bro.
Even when Saint Denis just covered up, turned his back, and was straight running away. And this is why it's the referee's job to prioritize the fighter's health and well-being. Though Saint Denis did have a solid performance in his next fight, the kind of damage he took in his debut is bound to have some long-term side effects to his health. So in MMA, the role of the referee is both critical and complex. When it's done right, fighters can trust that someone has their back in the cage. However, mistakes, as we've seen, can have significant consequences, impacting not just the outcome of the fight, but the careers and health of the athletes involved. It's a tough job, one that demands our respect, even as we demand accountability and improvement. So here's to the referees, the unsung heroes in the shadows of the spotlight. May their decisions be wise, their actions swift, and their contributions forever pushing MMA towards a brighter, fairer future. This is the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching.